Hi, I'm Monika Chutnik, and I help leaders learn how to lead their international and virtual teams. Together with my team in ETA Leadership and Culture, we make the change happen by means of training, coaching, or facilitation. This podcast, A Step Ahead, has been created for all who want to grow in such an international, remote environment, who want to grow as leaders, as HR, as change agents, and simply as humans. I will be delighted to know that you make progress at work in life. All recordings and materials are available at www.astepahead.pro. I wish you a sense of fun and discovery. Hi, welcome to the A Step Ahead podcast. I'm actually very excited to be starting this first piece in the new channel. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from my podcast in Polish, which I've been running for more than 2 years now. And plenty of my listeners have been saying, when can we expect some content in English so that we can send it to our English-speaking colleagues? I've also been limited to Polish-speaking guests who do give a lot of value, and at the same time, I did not feel I have the right channel to access the English-speaking guests. So I'm, after more than 2 years of considering whether I would really manage and whether this is, the thing to do, I am launching it now, and I'm launching it, at a great pace, and I'm already having many guests which are delightful, already invited, and which are on the way to share their thoughts, their experience, and their best practice with you. I've been concentrating on this podcast on the best practice, on new trends in leadership, on what we all need to feel good and perform great at work, mostly in the context of international and virtual environments. I hope that you will appreciate also this piece that we have today dedicated to human-centric leadership or human-centered leadership, depending on where you come across this vocabulary. I'm talking to Kinga Jaśkowiak, who is representing Hewlett Packard Enterprise, a great company with a great heritage, a great tradition of treating people fairly and with a lot of attention. Kinga is sharing her thoughts and also giving us an urgent call for action as leaders into the human-centric leadership. Let's enjoy the call. And as I've just noticed that Kinga has not really introduced herself in the conversation, let me just highlight that her professional role is strategic skills and enablement partner within the Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We are living in turbulent times. This is clear. So the question that many organizations might ask themselves, what is the cure? What is the guarantee that will keep the people with us? What is the guarantee that might be stopping the floating away of the best talent? What's the right way to lead people? Today, I have an amazing speaker and amazing topic. Let's talk about human-centric leadership. What is human-centric leadership? Maybe first I will ask you, why bother with this topic at all?
Sure. Thank you, Monika. So, the pandemic, the great resignation, or in some cases, realization, and in case of Europe, the recent war in Ukraine, brought the need to turn into the human-centered leadership instead of what we used to call resources or people management. And this topic has become both important, and it requires training many new skill muscles immediately because our people need us to assist them in this new reality now. They can't wait.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a call to action, really. But this might also be the very right response to sustaining the organization in the turbulent environment. So how does this topic impact you? How are you connected professionally or personally with the topic of human-centered leadership?
So I'm in a strategic skills and enablement organization at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And for the last 15 years, I've been holding various HR positions, and I've been mainly focused on both employee and leader development, learning, training. And I've been, for these last 15 years, observing significant shifts in the skill requirements and the expected behaviors, the behaviors that we expect from our employees and leaders, given the transformations that we've been going through. So I'm here today to talk about one of the most recent and urgent, the need for moving into the direction of human-centered leadership or human-centric leadership to make the people management, to humanize the people management.
And also maybe to shift away from the old way of thinking about what is really people management. In science, there is this debate, which I have been observing for years. What's the difference between management and leadership? I guess we are really concentrating on leading people, and the people are not just becoming an object of the leadership activities, but indeed a subject of these activities. So if you may give a small comment, what is really human-centered leadership?
So the definition of of human-centered leadership is pretty simple and straightforward. It's just putting people first while supporting a business, while supporting your customers, leading an organization or a company. You may ask why, as you asked the question, why there's so much buzz about it, if the whole idea of people leadership is to deal with and lead people. But the traditional people leadership has used to be mainly about performance, profitability, deadlines, metrics, results, as opposed to human-centered leadership. And that is why there is such a huge need for turning into the human-centered leadership direction to promote the leadership that makes success happen with people, thanks to them, not despite them, as Josh Bersin, the guru, the HR guru and celebrity, says.
Gallup Institute data shows quite a bizarre mechanism that has appeared in the recent years. I mean the years when the coronavirus started and when many people started working remotely. Their data shows that people have increased their effectiveness, their productivity, but strangely, their well-being has decreased, and in some cases, and for some roles, it has decreased dramatically. What we are seeing just a year and a half later is a wave of a great resignation. And that makes me ask a question, which you have been referring to partly, that the human is in the focus of the leadership activities. The leadership is becoming much more personal. Why does it matter, especially in the virtual environment?
It is important because in the virtual environment, we miss many hints that we get when it comes to, that we get in a face-to-face interaction, when it comes to interacting with people. We can't see, in many cases, if the cameras are not used in the meetings, we can't see their body language in general. It's hard for us to sense the emotions, the actual state, mental state of the person. So it is important to schedule some quality time with your employees to discuss all of these elements that we find missing when we are not in direct touch with the people.
What I'm thinking is, this human-centered leadership really something new? Like the thing which you mentioned, putting people first. I heard it in many corporate organizations for many years, like at least 20. That's where my memory dates back to. So I'm thinking, what is different? What is special? Why is it different now when we talk about this human-centered leadership?
Yeah, so nowadays we try to not only support, and assist our employees with this human-centered leadership, we also try to prepare and equip our people leaders so they can start assisting their employees based on this, put your mask with the oxygen first on your mouth before you assist the others. So we try to teach people leaders how to build their emotional intelligence, how to start with themselves, how to start discovering and managing their own emotions before they can start assisting others, before they can start helping their employees manage their own emotions, mental states.
I'm also thinking about one more aspect. In fact, when I go back with my memory to those putting people first, I think the feeling from many organizations was that it was just a slogan, because the people were in fact treated as resources. So it was like, do a proper or a smart resource management. That was really the understanding of putting people first as precious resources, we could put it. But the name of resource is not very human centered. It's just a resource in a company, like finance, like the other activities that the company is doing. It's not very human in a sense. So the evolution which I am witnessing, which I'm observing around, is that especially the new generations no longer want to be treated as just resources. They really want to be appreciated as their full, complete individuals, bringing into the workplace everything that they are, including their individual diversity as well, including their emotional state, including their individual talents, not just resources. That's what I'm thinking. It has been a constant shift when we look at the new generation. What's your perception of it?
Yes, even if you look at the terminology that's being used nowadays in bigger companies, we no longer call employees or workers. We call them team members. We call them colleagues. Similar in case of people managers. We rarely call managers nowadays managers. We call them management coaches or leadership coaches. So there is definitely a shift.
Now, when I'm thinking about these new trends in workplace management, for example, we used to be talking about work-life balance. Now it's much more relevant to be talking about work-life fit. And again, isn't this a way to approach your team member, as a complete individual with certain personal obligation, with certain lifestyle, with certain access to some things and services? A work-life fit, in my understanding, to some extent, it also goes along the same lines as human-centered leadership. So how does it work in practice? What does a human-centered leader do? What, the practical thing of it?
Yeah, so the human-centered leader is definitely working on and developing a couple of aspects of a couple of skills. One of them is their emotional intelligence, which covers, a whole scope of understanding your own emotions, managing them, and then helping others in managing their emotions, supporting them through your empathy. So the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. This belongs to emotional intelligence too, and is indispensable nowadays, because how can a leader support their team if they themselves resist or suffer from panic attacks after a change occurs? So first you need to kind of take care of yourself in terms of how you're dealing with many changes that are happening nowadays. And then you can assist your employees to understand what their perspective on what is happening on the current reality is, and helping them to deal with it. Then the ability that you definitely need to be effective with your empathy is listening actively, the skill to listen actively. I still find it underestimated, but it's a great virtue of a human-centered leader. we've been so far mentoring a lot. So sharing our wisdom, sharing our knowledge with others for way too long. This is the era that has just come, is the era of coaching, listening actively, asking, challenging people to find answers, to come up with their own solutions by asking them the right questions. And that's what we should be doing as human-centered leaders. Another thing that is very important for a human-centered leader is the vulnerability, the ability to show that you also make mistakes, that you're a human being, not a robot, without deprived of emotions, that it happens to you that you have some good and bad days, that you are one of them, you're similar to your colleagues or team members. Remember that leader who models vulnerability creates an environment of psychological safety and mutual trust. That's why it's so important to have it as have the vulnerability as one of the tools in your human-centered leadership toolbox. The last but not least thing on the list, important for a human-centered leader, is humility. So the ability of being humble, meaning acknowledging in front of first yourself and then others that you are not perfect, that you and the ability to not to focus only on yourself, but also on others, helping others first.
The characteristics which I have managed to note down was emotional intelligence of a leader, was the empathy, was humility. What did I miss out?
Vulnerability. And active listening.
The 5 top skills. Like, this is really a kind of a set of instructions. What does a human-centered leader do? How does this person act in relationship to other people? And there is certainly a big piece of being self-aware, self-mindful in a way, and a mindful leader. That's what I'm thinking. By the way, I recently read a very interesting article. It was some of the research quoted in Harvard Business Review. And what was investigated was like which kind of a skill is mostly valid on the C level, from a CEO, COO. And wouldn't you believe it? It was a listening. So it seems that even on the highest level of organization, what people really appreciate in their leaders the most is the ability to listen. That's quite amazing. And now when I think about the most successful leaders that we know, not only in business, but also internationally, these are the people who know how to listen to their team. Another thing is actually combined with this emotional intelligence and asking questions. I'm resonating with this one. When I started learning as a coach, when I started getting ready to the profession of the coach, the most scary thing for me was really asking these questions to people, like, how do you feel? What does it make you think? How does it impact you? I used to be thinking, that these questions are somehow, too personal, or maybe they are irrelevant. Maybe they will be strangely received by the other person that I'm talking to. I was really terrified when I was supposed to ask them the first, the second time. But what I discovered, and that's the point which I want to share with the leaders who are listening to us now, is that these questions have been bringing amazing depth of the conversation, and a speed up in the relationship that we have been building between the two of us, whoever was the not only coaching client, but also a person who was just, talking to me, or who I was just talking to. And over time, I have just learned to ask these questions on the go. And I'm so happy about that. So leaders, don't worry. Don't be scared of asking questions about how other people feel and what they think, because they really help you get to the very heart of it.
Yes, Monika. So I think at the top of what you've just said one more thing that I would add is don't be afraid of silence, because silence brings also space to share, emotions, share your feelings, share, ideas. People are usually afraid of silence, but it creates, this opportunity for both, the person who leads the conversation and the person who participates in the conversation. It allows, the relationship building happening in the background, but also, it's just like a breath, it allows you to, it fills you in with some thoughts, with some realizations that you can then share.
I like what you said. Silence is an opportunity. I would also phrase it this way. It seems to be very true. I was reading some research about how many moments of silence people are usually willing to stand, to hold when they have a conversation. And it turned out that there are some nations which are extremely good at keeping silence and also respecting the other person's time to reflect. And these would be Japan and Finland, where you would have a very, a conversation full of moments of silence. And, speaking over the silence would be a sign of a disrespect to the other person, because in fact, you would be showing that if you get asked and you start answering immediately, it's just a proof that you haven't been thinking about what to answer. You just started talking. On the other end of the scale is the US culture, US American culture, which seems to be culturally allergic to silence. It seems to be that the moments of silence are very awkward in a conversations. They seem to be very taken very uneasily. So it's also a hint to those of you who work in international teams. What you might do as a leader is just to address the topic of silence directly. And you can either steer the moments of silence yourself, or you can just address it and tell your people, it's okay to be silent for a moment, or please take a moment to think it over. It's perfectly fine to do so. And I'm thinking about this psychological safety. This seems to be a necessary component of creativity and openness in a team belonging. How do you observe this working in practice, Kinga?
Yes, so when it comes to personal belonging and building trust, human-centered leadership supports it tremendously, because you try to understand other people's position. You try to take their lens in various situations. You can simply, win their trust thanks to being open to a different perspective, being open to this diversity that you mentioned at the beginning. This is interesting that so far we've been looking at diversity only through the gender, race, and race lenses, which is obviously, these two lenses are extremely important, but there is much more into diversity that the human-centered leader should somehow focus on. There is definitely cultural difference. There is, the personality difference that should be included. There is a lot of, there are a lot of factors that make us different from others, including, our unique perspective that we bring into the world, both, the business and the personal world. So it is important to start including these perspectives, and empathy, emotional intelligence, active listening, they all enable that. They all allow us as the leaders to hear these differences, and to have the chance to get to know, to understand them, to get to know them much better.
What might be some of the natural opportunities that leaders have or might create for this special kind of a connection with their team members? What hints would you give to people who would like to start doing it in a much more active and conscious way?
Mm-hmm. So definitely having, regular conversations, like one-on-ones with your employees, is one of the ways in which you can enable the sharing, and and allow this opportunity, allow this trust building to happen. I would call those, one-on-ones in which you should focus rather than on performance, on, checking the status of some projects, on the person and on their unique needs, both, personal and professional. If I would start with the personal ones because they are the base, they are fundamentals for the professional ones. And if they are all in place, if all of these personal needs are met, then you can move to the professional ones. Because if one of them is neglected, then, it immediately will impact the professional life. So I would start with discussing in these one-on-ones personal needs and, the personal situation of the person, if that person is obviously open to talk about it. Please be also, sensitive to people not being open and saying no to that such a proposal. And then talking about the professional life in terms of, career development. So focus on the individual's aspirations, their plans, maybe a great way to build a strong relationship with them. So again, focus on putting people first is what you want to involve, what you want to engage in.
I'm thinking about the vulnerability which you mentioned. In fact, I perceive it as a key to really developing this personal connection. You mentioned that perhaps not every employee will be willing to immediately tell us about how they are and what they feel. I would be very much in line with that. The most simple and the most powerful way of inviting people to share is sharing yourself first. This is when you really become the personal leader. You become a leader because you are a leader, because you are a leader as a person. You also show some of your own doubts or how some situations impact you. Now I'm thinking you mentioned the war in Ukraine. And we've been having a comparison, we are a training company. We've been having a comparison between two kinds of groups. In some trainings, we decided as an organization, to spend a few minutes up front in the beginning of a training to ask, okay, so how do you feel about the current situation? How does it impact you? What does it bring to our class today? And in some other trainings, the HR was unwilling or the sponsor was unwilling for such a topic to appear. And let me tell you that the other groups, that the second type of groups was much more turbulent. There was something happening in the background which we were not able to access, especially virtually. And the cooperation, the learning was very uneasy. Just as you said, if you do not somehow touch the sensitive part first, if you do not let it appear in the contact, if you do not just accept the fact that it exists, you don't need to solve, the situation of the world, but you just need to admit that it's true. And then you can think about the learning, then you can think about the performance, then you can think about all the other things that we traditionally require in the work life. That's one of the striking examples from our recent experience as a company.
I love it, Monika. And I find this acknowledging that the situation is difficult, for everybody is the key here. I think it opens people's mouths, it opens people's hearts, and they're much more likely to start sharing what they feel, how what they are facing right now. That's what I see many human-centered leaders doing. They simply, whenever they have their team meetings, they open the space once again at the beginning of the meeting to people to share, to share what kind of needs they may have at the moment, what kind of emotions or, internal struggles they are going through. Share, some also, in case of this, war in Ukraine, some people were willing to share, how they deal with the situation in a sense of helping others, helping the refugees, how they've addressed by, taking actions this situation. So that's a great way of dealing with such uneasy, turbulent, as you said, situations, to acknowledging it, that it's difficult, that we are facing a challenge or a true change right now, and allowing and giving people space to say how they feel with it.
And having the courage just to accept that it's the fact. It's you don't need to do anything about that as a leader. What you need to do is just to accept that it's a fact. Basically, maybe that's even a challenge, not to take any action, not to try to solve the situation somehow, but just to make it a fact that it exists, and appreciating that. We've been talking about human-centric leadership a lot on the personal level. Now we have brought it on the team level already, so on interacting with groups. I want to comment on this on this added value of doing so, especially in virtually collaborating teams. What is such a challenge is to understand what other team members think and feel. I mean, as a team member, you can get access to other people's minds by, having a private conversation, by making, just a private phone call, or by having a chat exchange. But you are physically able to do it with one or two persons from the team usually. You wouldn't know, like, as a team member, you wouldn't really know what is the atmosphere of the whole group, of the whole team. So if a leader in a team meeting creates a little space in the beginning of the meeting just to share how I feel, how other people feel, and I'm thinking of those whiteboards, the virtual whiteboards that people use to submit content anonymously. You can use a menti.com or any other of those fantastic tools for submitting individually anonymous answers. And it's just like a way to confirm that my feelings as a team member are in line with the other members feel. And that also stimulates the belonging. It's like, yes, we are in the same pack. We are on the same boat. And it also creates much more openness to discuss this topic in further private conversations with other people, which, as we know, decreases the tension. It releases the stress. So it's one of the fantastic ways to decompress a little bit. What else? What else could a leader do on a practical level to introduce the human-centric leadership in practice?
Yes, I loved how you called it decompress, because that's what I've got a feeling that many people need nowadays, the opportunity to decompress. So one of the things you can approach the problem of a high level of stress and give people an opportunity to vent that, not in a bad way, but rather, to do it through talking, is organizing some sessions in which you can put people into the breakout rooms. Some of the communication platforms allow that, which allows you to put them into small groups in which they can simply chat. It's not about having very insightful conversations, but rather, again, to have an opportunity to share freely what they think, what they feel, and to find on the other side of the phone or PC a person who listens to them, who acknowledges, some of their feelings, who acknowledges some of their fears, not solves the problems, because those, in many cases, are not to be solved by them, are out of control, out of the individual people's control. But, simply to create a space for talking and for sharing. Once again, I repeat myself, but that's extremely important, to do it for your employees.
Having a conversation is in fact the job of a leader, and enabling others to have a conversation. That's how we can put it, because without the conversation, no leadership happens.
Right.
That's basically true. So when I think about your organization, the Hewlett Packard Enterprise, it used to be on the cutting edge of creating leaders, understanding approach to people. What do you do in this area as a company?
We encourage our people leaders to have individual one-on-ones with their direct reports, with people who report to them, and during these meetings, check on how they are doing in general, and then also, we want them to have really robust career conversations with their individual employees, and we try to equip them in these conversations with some tools that can enable the development for self-assessment of their employee skills, and then development in places where they need to develop. We acknowledge also that the leadership should also happen at the individual level. We call it personal leadership. So we want all of our leaders, just like in case of emotional intelligence, to first take care of themselves and to focus on personal leadership, focus on building self-awareness and self-understanding before we ask them to assist others. That's one way of helping our employees. The other way of putting the human-centered leadership into practice is in the bigger meetings, including some activities that, again, allow people to share. We use a lot of we move towards very interactive sessions in which people can share their perspective freely in a way in which they want to share it. So we allow different channels of sharing thoughts and ideas, starting from, making yourself audible. So you can speak up, you can use poll, you can use a whiteboard that you've just mentioned. In these meetings, you can use a chat box. However, to create this comfort, to create this psychological safety to share. Some people will do it freely, orally. Others will prefer to remain anonymous. So that's what we try to address all of these needs in our team meetings.
What you've mentioned is a great set of various approaches, practical approaches and tools. Let me ask you about the wrapping. How is it wrapped? To what extent does the company communicate inside the human-centered leadership as a way to do a leadership?
Yes. So I've noticed that during the last couple of months, the communication has become much more personal rather than very official and professional. So it starts with really, with openings that are appealing to people's feelings and rather, informal. It's rather an informal way of designing the communication. In the past, it used to be more formal, dry. Now it involves, some, sharing personal thoughts and feelings with others. So showing the vulnerability, and also in many cases, I see leaders allowing, some interaction through this very official communication. So they are interested. They are interested in your opinion. So they ask for the feedback in whatever form works for them and for our employees. So this is really, for me, it's the embodiment of turning into the direction of a human-centered leadership, making things personal and appealing, referring to our people, their emotions first before, getting down into business.
If I ask you about a small piece of advice to a leader who would like to turn into the direction of human-centric leadership, or who would like to make a first step in this direction, what might this person do in practice?
I would say listen more actively and deeply that would be like the first golden rule that you've mentioned also. You've mentioned the importance of active listening nowadays. And I find it like the top one, be there for your people and listen to them, because thanks to that listening, you will be able to understand their perspective much, much better. Thanks to it, you'll be able to create this stronger relationship with them. You'll be able to respond to their needs in a much more precise way.
So have the courage to listen, or give yourself the opportunity to listen. That's what I'm taking from it. Thank you very much, Kinga. It's been very interesting to talk to you.
Thank you. Likewise. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, so it seems that listening, asking questions, and treating your team members and yourself as a complete human person seems to be the right thing to do. So simple and at the same time not easy at all, especially for leaders who might have a tendency to talk more than to listen. That's something contrary than we have learned in the past until now. So let's start, let's try. And I do encourage you. I recently heard that imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. So let's just go for it. Let's experiment with this a little bit. If you like to find notes to this podcast piece, you will find them at astepahead.pro/001. At the bottom of the page, you can also leave your comment and your impression, what resonates with you, which aspects of the human-centric leadership seem to be the most important from your point of view. If you're a LinkedIn user, you might also want to find the channel A Step Ahead by Monika Chutnik. I needed to add this additional piece in the name. And there you will be able to get informed about all the newest content and podcasts that I am creating. Other resources that you might find interesting are especially relating to the doubt whether we are actually able to combine the work, the life, us as humans, whether it's not in a contradiction. I do encourage you to go to the www.astepahead.pro and check for the text, How Eastern Philosophy Can Change the Way You Think. Also about yourself, your different roles, and approach to the different roles that we have in life. I hope that you will like it. And for today, thank you very much and goodbye.